Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are together with Fyodor Lukyanov, professor at the Higher School of Economics in Moscow, but he has several hats, one of which is the Valdai Director of Research, which is where I met him. And he is also the editor-in-chief of the Russia in Global Affairs, a prestigious journal on strategic affairs and Russia's place in the world in that strategic landscape. Fyodor, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a very big pleasure to be with you, Hasan.
Thank you very much. It's our pleasure, actually, and it's our. I'm very glad that you have found the time, actually, or I know you are in Belgrade for a conference, and then you have found time to join us. Just before we go on, let me express my deepest condolences to the Russian people and to the families of all the victims of the horrendous and the heinous attack that took place some days back. And we all think, like the rest of the world, that this is going to be one of the turning points in the history of the conflict in Ukraine, and what sort of consequences and repercussions it is going to produce, we are going to discuss. Shall I, let me ask you first, and let me have your take on who actually committed the crime. We understand the Russian authorities are quite firm in their statement that this is actually not just ISIL, because even if the some jihadist, Islamist minded terrorist committed the crime, there is the Russian authorities are quite firm in saying that they know who is behind it and who and which countries actually certainly contributed to the organization of this crime, and they know what to do. So can you actually share your views and analysis with us on this part first, and then we'll go on to the second part. That'll be about how this event is going to modify Russia's approach to the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, thank you very much for your warm condolences. That's really a big tragedy. Unfortunately, not the first one in recent Russian history. I'm old enough to remember the wave of terrorism related to the war in Caucasus in 1990s, and then the first war, and then the second war in Caucasus in the beginning of 2000s. And actually, the whole political career, a top political career of President Putin started with his involvement in attempts to tackle terrorism in Northern Caucasus. So that experience did shape him very significantly. As for this event, of course, I don't know who is behind what, as no one knows except probably our special services. So far, what we hear from the authorities, including President Putin, is okay. They indicate that they suspect some actors behind those people from Tajikistan who have been arrested for committing this crime, and even the head of Russian Federal Security Service, Mr. Bortnikov, said quite clearly that they expect some evidences about Ukraine. And the Secretary of Security Council, Mr. Patrushev, was even more direct in saying that he believed that Ukraine was behind it. At the same time, there is so far no clear statement that the Ukrainian state, Ukrainian services are behind it. So we cannot say anything before we will get the official, fully official confirmation. What we can say is that, of course, the Ukrainian intelligence and Ukrainian military units, military intelligence, they have already a big record of terror attacks in Russia, and they don't hide it. They say it openly with certain kind of proud. They are proud that they did it to particular people. So that's one thing. Another thing, which is a little bit strange, to put it mildly, how immediately and forcefully representatives from the United States, in particular the United States, but also from Europe, started to say that they are absolutely sure that Ukraine has nothing to do with that.
Yes.
That was, from my point of view, I can assess only in terms of public image, so to say. It was no need, actually, to be that eloquent defending Ukraine, because now, accidentally or not, but the impression which has been made is rather, it evokes more suspiciousness on the Russian side. They said too much about this. So they could limit their statements to one or two, but when it will be said so frequently, it creates certain sentiments. At the same time, of course, I cannot blame anybody. Logically, since we have a very extended conflict with Ukraine, a big war is going on, of course we can theoretically imagine anything. During the war, parts used to apply different methods. Frankly, the scale of attack and the style of attack is not what we could expect even from the Ukrainian side, but who knows? What is quite clear, and I think that it is not denied by the Russian authorities, is that the Islamic State or somebody else connected to this underground, they clearly had to do with this, probably instrumentally, but anyway. And of course, that creates a lot of different challenges to the Russian statehood and to the Russian stability, including the challenge of potentially rising xenophobia in the society vis-a-vis those migrants who come, like those who committed this crime, who came and did what they did. And to be honest, this issue about migration has not been properly addressed by the government since very long time. And now we see some repercussions, both in terms of practical involvement of these people and also public opinion, which is not very favorable to this situation, to put it mildly. So I hope at least that this tragic incident will contribute to the willingness of the government to really address this issue. I mean, not Ukrainian war, but the migration issue. In particular, because this area, unfortunately, and I'm afraid it's not, Russia is not unique, but in our case, it's very, very obvious. This area has become pretty corrupted, and serious measures are needed.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for this part. Actually, on the question of the illegal these people are not necessarily illegal migrants, I guess, in Russia. They are legal, but you know, the question is how many how many migrants would you need for these services, for this work and the other? But you are not basically unique in that, because we have some similar problem, which is probably in terms of the extent, you know, much bigger than what you have in Russia. That is the Syrian refugees who have some sort of a status, but we also have millions of other people who have no status at all, because Turkey doesn't, according to 1948 Convention on Refugees, it has basically it applies the that convention on the basis of certain geographical restrictions. So all those people who came from all over the world, but the mostly Eastern world, have no status at all, but they seem to be quite large in the Turkish society, and there is great resentment across the society, across the board, and it is become a major problem economically, but also social problems and various other problems. So you are not unique, but I do understand that, you know, that Russia will have to basically revise its policy on these on that migration business. Turning back to the question of Ukraine and the Western services involvement in the horrendous attack. Now, I think your point is quite important, that the Western states, in particular the United States and some European countries, came out immediately after, within hours basically, of the crime, saying that, you know, Ukraine has nothing to do with it. It wasn't Ukraine itself that presumably said it officially, but the United States. So that puts them on the dock, basically. They have something, or they fear about something as a result of this attack. On the one hand, they make them quite suspicious, and on the other, they also fear about certain other things that Russia might do in the war. So let's move on to that part, and let me just say, you know, in terms of the aims, because if a state basically organizes a terrorist attack against another state like Russia, then there should be some sort of assumptions on which they base their attack. What would be their assumptions? You know, the reiterated analysis in Turkey, in some Western countries and others, is that, you know, they have lost the war to all intents and purposes in Ukraine, and they want to somehow extend the war to Russia's territories, not the actual battlefield, because that is where they have been defeated heavily, but you know, to basically attack Russia, to use all sorts of violence, to, in a sense, scare off the Russian people, and to basically also drive a wedge between the President Putin and the Russian people and all that. What is your take on that?
No, obviously, the aim of such attack, as many other terror situations before is to shake the stability, the foundation of the society. And we remember, again, I started with some reminiscence about the 1990s and early 2000s when Russia struggled jihadists and Islamists in Chechnya. And of course, then time big terror attacks, like in Moscow, some similar issue with attacking concert hall in 2002. And then the most tragic event in the school in Beslan in northern Ossetia. The aim was very clear, to demonstrate to the people that the state is helpless and the state cannot protect them, and to shaken the foundations of stability and unity in the society. It didn't work in this way, and actually I believe that this approach should be changed by potential terrorists, because they should see a lot of examples, not only in Russia, but in many countries which suffered of terrorist attacks, that it doesn't work. The effect is normally the opposite. The more unity in the society, if it is a normal state, and most of states we deal with, that there are more or less stable statehoods. So in this regard, yes, we can imagine that on the Ukrainian side, decision has been made because of disappearance of chances to prevail on the battlefield, and there are many reasons for that, including the change of international stance on Ukraine, and the extremely actually betrayal by Americans, which at the most decisive point ceased to support them in terms of military. So of course you need to invent something else, if not to win, then at least to try to prolong the story and to give your population some sense of successful campaign. Let us put aside for a while this what happened in Moscow, near Moscow. We see a lot of other incidents, in particular attacks on Russian cities in the south, Crimea, sometimes successful attacks on military infrastructure, not frequently, but sometimes military infrastructure inside Russia. And of course, we should not be too arrogant on the Russian side, and we need to acknowledge that the capacity of Ukraine is still quite existing. So they do what they can, and they do it sometimes pretty. They make it painful for Russia. As for this terror attack, theoretically, yes, we can imagine that they expected to undermine Russian commitment to this war by doing this. But at the same time, actually, if they have this logic, that this is a very strange logic. I think this is a logic which disregards completely the real situation in Russia, and that means a deep miscalculation of political environment in our country.
Well, in terms of that miscalculation, I always tell my students in class when I'm teaching, I say, the United States is the champion of making mistakes in its foreign policy, and no other country can come any close to the United States in that race. So it may not be necessarily the Ukrainians' mistake, but the United States and the Western mistake, because in my view, the United States is not necessarily run by able politicians. So you have a deep state, basically led by the U.S. military-industrial complex, and then you have certain groups of intelligence here and there, and then the Congress, the think tanks, mostly funded by the military-industrial complex and others. So these guys are not necessarily about to enhance United States security or to protect United States interests, but they work for their own selfish interests. And this is not what this is not something that I actually say. It was President Eisenhower at the time who actually warned the U.S. public and the U.S. elite about the prospective role that this military intelligence complex was at the time seeking to play in U.S. decision making. So when it comes to basically analyzing why the United States is doing this and the other in this way or the other, most of the time you come to a your analysis most of the time is inconclusive, because in terms of a state with which puts its national interests at the center of its decision making, then you would expect that state not to do that. But this is always the case. Presumably, the United States and particularly the European governments who have been talking so hawkishly lately, particularly the Europeans. Well, I'm not quite sure whether I should call it hawkish, but I can't find any other word, in the sense that they are sort of crying out they're crying out to the public, saying that Russia should not be allowed to win the war in Ukraine. And their assumption is that if Russia were to win the war in Ukraine, then Russia would certainly move further, invading and occupying Baltic states and Poland and Romania, all those countries that are vulnerable to any Russian attack. This sounds simply and purely idiotic to many who can actually follow what is going on. And because Russia has territories 20 times that of Turkey, and Turkey, in terms of the land, is the largest and the biggest of Europe. So you have a Russia which has, in terms of territory, 20 times that of Turkey, and its population is less than twice that of Turkey. What would Russia do with all these territories if Russia was out to conquer a large part of Europe? But I think this is because they want to sort of goad the people into this very sensitive area of Russian budgie coming right across the border, so that the governments could actually extend their defense budgets. And once they increase their defense budget, who is going to benefit? The United States military-industrial complex, who will sell them weapons. And more importantly, the U.S. military intelligence complex would then be selling more and more weapons to the United States, keeping the United States defense budget at quite high, and all that. So what would you say about all this? What would be your take? So the planners may not have planned the whole thing, taking what damage they could actually inflict on Russia by doing this. Or at least, even if they took this at the center of their planning in their decision making, but at the same time, they are also about to raise what they call the awareness of the European people about the Russian danger.
You know, I have a ambivalent view on that. On the one hand, everything you say about the interests of military-industrial complex, about some selfish mercantilist approaches, it's nothing new. I remember all these arguments from my childhood and very young years during the Cold War. And frankly, at that time, many of us believed that it was Soviet propaganda which tried to blame Americans, the Cold War rivals. Afterwards, we learned that it wasn't just propaganda, maybe partly, but actually, yes, that's the way how big business, big state, big business close to the state, big business using state as a cover, how it operates. So not much hope that something seriously changed since that, actually. Having said that, I think that we should not underestimate what you call the idiotic, the stupidity of the contemporary international political class. I'm afraid that things which we, being here in Russia or being in Turkey close to this area, what we see as totally unwise and simply irrational, as you said, that Russia would try to take Baltic states and Romania, Poland, and so on. Being here inside, we understand that whatever we think about Polish or Romanians or Lithuanians, there are different feelings, of course, vis-a-vis them, as they have very clear feelings vis-a-vis us. But it's absolutely no need to try to conquer those territories, as you rightly said. Unclear what to do with them afterwards, because to extrapolate the situation after the Second World War, when Soviet Union made this big buffer zone in Eastern Europe, but that was a completely different situation. That is a world war. That was a world war with particular results, and that was actually at that time first taken by force, but then legitimized by big powers agreements, which are not at all in sight today. Of course, the logic by those who claim that Putin will not stop in Ukraine is based on the assumption that Ukraine is just a state like any other state. And then the conclusion, if Putin launched campaign against Ukraine, then of course after that he will continue. And I can assume that some people or many people in the West who are actually very ignorant about the development in this part of the world, they really believe in that. Meanwhile, we understand very well that Ukraine is a completely special, completely specific issue. So we cannot extrapolate the Ukrainian experience, Russian-Ukrainian experience on other countries, because no other country is as important strategically and as close historically, culturally, to Russia as Ukraine. And of course, what Putin wrote in his article half a year before the war started, the big big conceptual article about the historical unity of Russians and Ukraine, of Russia and Ukraine. He claimed very clearly in that article that the problem of Ukrainian existence is, from his point of view, historically unjustified, but okay, it's fine. It was the result of the emergence of Ukrainian state was a result of certain political and historical processes. But what he claimed in that article, we are fine with Ukrainian existence and Ukrainian sovereignty with one condition, that this country, this state, will never be anti-Russian, will never serve as a platform for anybody else's activities against Russia. If they keep this neutral, friendly status, that's fine. Ukraine is fine. If not, sorry. And that's exactly what happened with Ukraine. Since although Putin tried to explain it to many people, including most recently, including Tucker Carlson,
yes,
this long lecture about history of Ukraine, but the West is absolutely unable to listen to any arguments, any reasoning, which is contrary to the reasoning they used to apply. And unfortunately, coming to your question about how all these events, the terror attack and other, how it can, which impact it can have on the campaign and the development between Russia and Ukraine, I'm afraid that everything what happened and happens, and those claims about the strategic defeat which should be delivered to Russia, that brings Russian leadership and Putin in particular to one simple conclusion, that no agreement can be reached with those people, with the West, and with Ukrainian leadership, which is entirely covered by the West. And the only solution, unfortunately, this is a military victory. So as long as they say that Russia cannot be allowed to win, so the logic here is exactly the opposite. We cannot afford to lose. And that's it. So that's why we are where we are. And I don't expect any kind of movement towards some kind other than military activities anytime soon.
Well, I think you're right. Indeed, absolutely right in that, particularly diplomacy being gridlocked is totally unacceptable, in this day and age. When the Cuban Missile Crisis broke out, soon after the President Kennedy's announcement that he had ordered the United States forces to basically blockade Cuba in naval and air terms, the diplomacy between the two capitals had started immediately, and it only took about 3 weeks for the two countries, to leading countries in the world, to reach a compromise. But the absence of diplomacy in this particular conflict in Ukraine is incredible. It is certainly out of order, and as you said, it leaves Russia with only one option, that unless Russia basically inflicts a strategic defeat on Ukraine, which may be nearing, then other than that, there would be no solution to the Ukrainian question, at least for the foreseeable future. I think that's one. And the other issue here that I would like to touch is The Westerners, I mean, I'm sure their services and their experts know it, but their political class and the decision makers never basically take, or they don't seem to take it into consideration in their approach to the question. That is, actually, Putin has been very mild in dealing with the Ukrainian war. So from the right beginning, as he outlined his position that the Ukrainian and the Russian peoples are the same people, so there has been some actually even voices, not necessarily opposition voices, but certain group of people who keep saying to President Putin, you know, with all this military capability with which we can actually destroy Ukraine, why are we not using them? Now, one question is, um, do you think this is the time that Russia might actually change its military strategy and use its military might against Ukraine to reach a quick military victory over Ukraine in the weeks and months? And the second thing is, how do you think the advent of Trump to the American presidency, which is on the one hand very likely, but on the other hand, we don't know how the United States deep state will do to prevent Trump from taking presidency, including an assassination, I believe. Okay, I don't rule it out, basically, because they could do it. But you know, the advent of Trump to the presidency, to the White House, how would it basically change the whole parameters?
Okay, as far as the first issue is concerned, I mean, whether Russia will now apply all it has to achieve a quick victory. I'm not a military specialist, so it's not my field of expertise to evaluate whether Russian change of tactics can transform this war or not. What I know, as you mentioned, that many people, those who apparently, allegedly understand more in military affairs, they asked many questions from the beginning of the war, why it has been conducted in this particular way, and certain issues which had to be done from the beginning to destroy important infrastructure and bridges and railways and all the rest, why it never happened. So I have no answers. I think you suggested the right direction of thinking, that Putin's perception of this war was from the beginning quite interesting, quite non-linear.
Mm-hmm.
And his perception of Ukrainian people, as he claimed many times before, that this is one nation, this is one people, there's no difference between Russians and Ukrainians, which I personally don't share, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I think the situation is unfortunately much more complicated, but anyway, that's what he believes. Probably that was the case, or some mistakes made from the beginning in the strategic planning of this campaign, when now it's almost common wisdom that the enemy has been underestimated massively from the beginning. Anyway, yes, I think that Russia is changing the tactics. And already now we see that the scale of attacks against infrastructure is much bigger than it used to be. Russia is using much more sophisticated, ammunition against Ukrainian infrastructure. Russia is targeting logistical sites and places where, for example, foreign fighters, these mercenaries, are concentrated. And based on what we heard today from high-placed, high-ranked security officials, it can be seen as a warning to at least certain leaders of Ukrainian army and security services that now they are real targets. We will see. Of course, there are no magical means. And if Russia could win this war quickly and easily, it would do it anyway. So that's fact of life. That is a very big war, very, very difficult one. And we should not underestimate the enemy even now, when the enemy has been exhausted, but still. So yes, Russia is gaining, but it will be most likely still pretty difficult. So we can only expect the endurance on the Russian side, and I think that was one of Vladimir Putin's basic assumptions, that whatever the West will do, whatever ammunition, technique, everything, airplanes, missiles, it will deliver. At the end of the day, Russian resource is bigger, and Ukraine will be, so to say, finished earlier.
Okay, and the our assumption, the advent of Trump's to presidency.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
How would it play a role in the resolution of the conflict?
About Trump, so we know Trump pretty well. We witnessed his first term. We were very much amused by many things he did. We had a lot of expectations when he suddenly won elections. And then we ceased to have these expectations, because what happened in the US during Trump's term, that was no chance for him, even if he really wanted that, no chance for him to deliver anything on Russia, on changing the general course of our relationship. What can be different this time? Maybe not. But what I hear from my American contacts is that the Trumpists and Trump entourage, they really prepare now for the presidency. Unlike the first one, when Trump won, absolutely the biggest surprise was for him. Not even for Americans and for Russians. That was for him. He did not expect to win. And that's why he came to the most important place in the authority in the world, being totally unprepared, alone. And that's why the deep state, or however you call it, basically consumed Trump completely. This time they want to make another entry, and to make a not ethnic cleansing, but bureaucratic cleansing in Washington, which would give Trump much more support inside the apparatus. We will see. I'm not sure it will be that easy, but it's up to them. What we can expect if Trump wins, and that probably will be positive for us, that the scale of scandal in Washington will be that big that this struggle, internal struggle, will totally paralyze everything. I easily can imagine that. And again, looking from here, if the White House and the Congress and all of them are paralyzed by the internal infighting, that's fine. We're fine with that. The less United States on the international arena, the better. To expect anything like a meaningful change in U.S. policy, I think it's not possible, because it might come step by step, because we see the trend. The trend is towards deepening of crisis of American globalism. But this is a very, very long process that will continue. Trump can contribute to that significantly in his second term, but it will not mean that soon, months, year after, the U.S. stance on international affairs will change. At the same time, now Trump is not there yet, but we see that even the very tiny majority of Republicans in the House of Representatives basically destroyed the whole machine to support Ukraine. Probably they will resolve it soon, but the delay was several months, and at very important point for Ukrainians. So, to summarize, I think that we should not expect any qualitative change in our relationship with the United States, but we can expect that the United States' ability to participate in things which are bad for Russia can be diminished.
Okay. Thank you very much, Fyodor. Thank you for sharing your time with us and your thoughts and analysis. Dear viewers, this is the end of our another strategic talk with experts across the world. And see you next time. Bye bye for now.
Thank you. Bye bye, Hasan.
Thank you.